Something wrong? You don't look well. Are you hurt?
True to a witcher. Died, came back to life. Nobody's seen him for 5 years, and he wants to know if something's wrong.
Few fantasy games have gotten the attention and widespread acclaim as The Witcher. Initially starting off as a book series written by Andrzej Sapkowski, it has since become well known thanks to its video game adaptations, which gave players the ability to step into the shoes of the renowned Geralt of Rivia and his adventures to slay monsters, evil political agendas, and of course, the ladies.
Yes!
While enjoying both attention and praise, thanks to CD Projekt Red's development of the series since the first game back in 2007, their continued work to the third game would be their crowning achievement, as Geralt's third adventure was and is considered to be one of the best RPG experiences of all time. But while players got to decide whether Yen or Triss was the love of their life, while also clearly missing who the actual best girl of the game was, the entire series would not be here without CD Projekt's first entry. Not only was the first Witcher game an amazing gateway for players to take part in, it was considered to be one of the best for 2007. A mature fantasy world where magic, monsters, politics, race, and wealth blur the ethical lines of right and wrong. Geralt's adventure as a monster slayer is far from simple, and the supposed monsters he's destined to slay are never just the actual monsters themselves. With the first Witcher game now a little over 17 years old, and still the only game in the series that's a PC exclusive, does it still hold up to play today? The story of the first Witcher game actually takes place after the events that occurs in the novels, but you don't actually need to read them in order to enjoy The Witcher, because Geralt has a severe case of amnesia. No, not that amnesia. When the game begins, our titular hero is seen running away, possibly from this absurd camera shake that's about to make me He is found to be badly wounded and on his deathbed. With the help of his friends, he returns to Kaer Morhen, the home of the Witchers of the School of the Wolf, where he recovers thanks to the help of a sorceress named Triss Merigold, but has no memory of his life before today. He does have some semblance of connection to the people and life around him, so not all is lost. As he's trying to pick up his life again, Kaer Morhen is attacked by an unknown group who attempt to steal the mutagens and secrets that help create a Witcher, the powerful metahumans who hunt monsters, aka Geralt and the rest of his team. In the aftermath of the attack, the Witcher mutagens and secrets are stolen by a group known as the Salamandra, and a young Witcher in training named Leo dies during the defense. And so Geralt sets out on his journey to find those responsible, as well as recover his lost memories. From the outset, the plot seems very simple, and is rather quick in giving players the primary motivation behind Geralt's adventure. However, the story of The Witcher is far from being just simple. In trying to find out more about Salamandra, he learns that there are many forces at work that stem beyond the main group. His time in Vizima, where the game largely takes place, leads to many different characters, factions, and plot developments that will cause him to search for more answers than he'd like. It's a well-told story that starts off slow, but unravels itself well over the course of the game. The main villain that's meant to drive the story is a bit forgettable as a character for me, though the true villain and his character reveal were kinda cool actually. I don't want to spoil anything, but I thought that your interaction with that specific character and their eventual reveal at the end of the game were very unique twists to the main story. But it's the different parts of the world which tie into the main quests that make it feel like a Witcher game. Trying to figure out why a beast stalks the village on the outskirts of Vizima, playing detective and figuring out who in the city is connected to the Salamandra group, reconnecting with characters who are tied to Geralt's past, trying to play nice at a political party, but you still say yes to a princess who wants to see how your sword works.
What are you waiting for? Undress!
It's a lot of moving parts that help complement the main story and make the world of The Witcher feel uniquely theirs. This is actually something that the third Witcher game does very well, with the sheer amount of stories involved that tie into Geralt finding Ciri. It does feel a bit on the shorter side for the first game, and lacks some of the more impactful stories that the third game iterated upon. But it still carries the world-building torch very well, and it never loses its footing with making you feel like you're part of its world. A lot of it comes down to how well the NPCs are portrayed, and each character, even down to the most basic of NPCs that simply spout a line or two, make the world of The Witcher come alive. The random townsfolk who shout at Geralt, Thaler, who's a bit of a schemer, Siegfried, who is a knight to a fault, Shani, who is factually best girl, do not argue with me on this one, Yen and Triss fans, Dandelion, who is your lovable but sometimes forgets to use his brain bard. It's the characters and their voices that carry the story. You even get a compendium for all of the individuals and entities that you come across, for even more world building. Geralt definitely takes the cake as the leading role, and Doug Cockle, who has voiced Geralt in every single game, still sounds Geralt as ever.
Hello, son. I'm not your son, Gramps.
This might just be me, but I do think Geralt sounds a lot more talkative in this game than he does in 2 or 3. So more of his charming, stern, and serious personality at work here. Also, fun aside for some fans, alongside Geralt, Uncle Vesemir and Eskel are the only voice actors I've heard who continue to voice their characters in The Witcher 3. Everyone else sounds like they've had their voice actors changed. The game also lets you influence some parts of the story, thanks to a lot of dialogue-driven choices that Geralt can make. It's not necessarily varied that you can influence Geralt's personality per se, but it's enough to make branching story paths occur in the game, as well as let Geralt take a few stances on certain situations. Truth be told though, it's a bit binary with some of Geralt's decision making, but I didn't mind it so much since I always thought Geralt as someone being inherently good-natured, so anytime a good decision came up, I always chose it. There are a few instances where the moral choice is not clear-cut though, and they will make you take a stance whether it's the right or wrong one. Though in matters where snoo is involved, there is only one correct answer. Yes! A cool thing too is that the enhanced version of the game also comes with some side story missions that you can play independently of the main story. I didn't get to play any of them fully yet, but the fact that they are there means you get more story content in the world of The Witcher. As far as things that kind of feel like they don't hold up, it's mostly the storytelling bits, like the weird love triangle story arc, that you have to make a decision on. Spoilers ahead, so skip here if you need to. There's a point where you have to choose between Shani and Triss, and it literally feels like a pissing contest between the two on who thinks they are the better partner for Geralt. It feels a little forced and humorous in a ironic way, but it also just felt left field seeing how desperate they are at proving that they are the better wife material. Like, actually.
I wanted to talk to you about the future. About us.
Yes.
But this arc was just weird to come across and made the characters feel extremely petty.
What does that hag know about raising children? Everyone knows she can't have her own.
Also, sorry Yen Bros, but she ain't in this one. Small nitpicks aside, I think it's still a very good story package, and it kept my interest all the way through. It may be a bit rough in how the narrative direction was written in a few story parts, especially if the narrative stories of The Witcher 3 are still fresh in your head, but it's an engrossing one to go through, and it doesn't feel like it's lost its edge. If you're coming from The Witcher 3, some of the gameplay of the first will be more or less familiar to you, barring the biggest exception, which is the actual sword fighting mechanic. It's very interesting because it plays like a hack and slash game, but also feels like a weird rhythm QTE game. No, not that kind of game. When you enter combat, you basically left-click enemies to start a combo slash, and whenever your sword cursor flashes, that's when you can click again to continue it, even connecting to an adjacent opponent if you're fast and accurate enough. Anytime you click an enemy, the game automatically moves you into the correct close-range position to attack them, and it kind of feels like a hybrid between a real-time pause game and a third-person action one. It's a very unique system for which you have connected attacks, rather than just simply spamming the attack button that you often do for hack and slash style games, something that the later entries actually switch to, but not completely hack and slash. Weirdly enough, I kind of liked it, because of how rhythmic it felt to string attacks, but the jankiness of the targeting and positioning kept it from me liking it a lot more. Because the game prioritizes positioning first to ensure an attack connects, it sometimes feels disjointed or slow when you're trying to start or chain attacks, but it never lands properly because of you or the enemy position, sometimes even accidentally targeting other enemies. Also, the enemy's health is tied to their target locked halo, which is on the ground, so get ready to stare at their feet all day to see how dead they are. Not that some of you don't mind. What takes this combat a step further is that you also have 3 different styles to choose from in order to handle specific enemy types. Strong, brutish enemies require the use of the strong style in order to take them down faster. The fast style helps you hit enemies that would otherwise dodge any of your other attacks, and the group style lets Geralt perform capoeira with the sword. This requirement for style change, along with having to use your silver sword for monster enemies and steel swords for humanoids, adds more complexity and layer to the combat that still makes it fun to play. It's a very unique system that I've never seen anywhere else, and it at least keeps the game from being a complete button mash fest by having you consider your proper weapon and styles to use. As a complement, there's also an RPG system for Geralt, in which he can choose where his experience should go, ranging from upgrading his attributes, signs, or sword talents to cater to your combat preference. It's fun and varied enough to pick and choose what you'd like and where you think your points will matter the most, though I think the upgrades tend to lean on the swords as you level up, since you will be using them a lot. But you do get a good variety of options, and my RPG itch was thoroughly scratched. Geralt also gets magical abilities in the form of signs, which range from pushing enemies with the Force, and no, not that Force, setting enemies ablaze, or creating a defensive force field. It's a fun variety, and you get to upgrade them as well. The main drawback to the signs is that you only get one from the start, and you progressively get the others in different chapters. I do wish you could have had all of them to begin with, something the later games actually do, but I guess it's meant to fit the whole theme of Geralt is trying to get his memories back. You'll have to focus your points elsewhere in the meantime until you get your favorite sign. I primarily used Ard and Igni for the entire game, both of which you get early, so I didn't worry too much about investing elsewhere. Like every Witcher game, Geralt also gets the chance to meditate, to pass time, invest his talent points, and perform alchemy. Here, Geralt can create a myriad of potions, poisons, bombs, and sword oils to help him in combat. It's a fun and true to the Witcher system that Geralt can utilize, and it was definitely useful a few times when I needed some enemies to die fast, as well as help me recover my health during combat. If I ever come back to this game in the future, I think I would actually up the difficulty, as I believe the harder mode does sort of require you to use your alchemy extensively in order to survive fights. My only minor complaint is that you have to meditate at an inn or some campfire on the map, so if you're not next to them and you want to level up, pass time, or make potions, you'll have to go out of your way to find them. I was definitely babied by the later games in which you can meditate anywhere. I enjoyed the combat, but I do think the jankiness of the positioning and target priority keeps it feeling dated. Beyond the normal combat gameplay, there's also the adventuring portion where Geralt runs through the world in typical RPG fashion. Each chapter will have you talking to different characters, accepting quests of varying degrees, slaying monsters for a contract, and slaying ladies because they actually want you to.
I'll speak plainly. I like what I see and want to get to know you.
Yeah, boy.
I'd say it was a good variety, despite the older questing formula making you do a lot of killing alongside some fetching. But honestly, I don't think Geralt would have it any other way. I did like certain missions, like the investigative portion in Chapter 2, where Geralt basically is playing detective and questions everyone to see who's guilty, or the more Witcher thematic quests, like lifting a curse of a Noonwraith. You do see a lot of these mission types in The Witcher 3, and they aren't as abundant in the first, but it was still fun and interesting to see its original basis in this game. My favorite part about the adventuring is the semi-free roam nature of each chapter, where Geralt gets to handle the quests in any particular order. Of course, the game signposts you to follow the main quest, but it's how you bump into other encounters or happen upon some random event that makes the world feel fun to explore. Sure, it's not as extensive as its third iteration, but the game making Vizima feel alive with its NPCs and how much freedom you get with picking and choosing, this 2007 game feels a lot more up to date than I initially thought. It even includes some fun side quests that involve fistfights as well as some dice poker. The fisticuff matches were fun for a bit, but I didn't really make them a top priority. And the poker dice game, well, it's not Gwent, I'll tell you that much. It was fun to a point, but I just wasn't a fan of the randomness of it, and I would have preferred the actual card poker. Or Gwent, because Gwent is great, though that's a bit of an unfair minigame comparison. Oh, but there's one sinfully funny aspect about this game that it has over its iterations, and that is the fact that you get collectible cards for the ladies that Geralt takes to bed. It's kind of absurd how easy it is for Geralt to catch them all, if you get my meaning, and how fast the ladies go from 0 to 100 with trying to get into Geralt's pants.
Don't worry, this won't hurt a bit.
Triss, please, he just woke up. Well, I suppose when you have amnesia and you're forgetting about your promised waifu, sorry Yen, I guess everything is off the table. Except for Shani. You literally put her on the table.
Nice.
There are a few aspects about the adventuring portion that does make it feel its age. One of the biggest things is the lack of fast travel. Now, I didn't mind it as much because Geralt isn't particularly slow, and he can get to different locations in a matter of a few real-world minutes, but it's how some mission structures can sometimes make the questing feel arduous. This is mainly a problem in the first chapter, where sometimes if you do quests individually, you'll often have to go back and forth between the different parts of the outskirts, and it can feel monotonous when Geralt has to run a full marathon. This is barely an issue in the later chapters, except for maybe the Lakeside chapter, but there were a few times where I did get a bit fatigued from having to run across the map again and again. At least Geralt runs decently fast. This led me to always make sure that I did quests in batches, so I didn't have to waste any time traveling across the map. And I recommend you do so too if you give this game a try. Also, considering that this mainly happens in the first chapter of the game, I recommend you keep playing even if the first chapter feels really slow, because the map structure and mission variety does get way better by the second chapter. Other than that, and the wonkiness in the combat, the overall gameplay structure of The Witcher still felt great to play, and I was never bored with either of the combat or adventuring portions. For its age, The Witcher doesn't look half bad, but you can easily tell it's on the older PC side. The overall graphical presentation is still decent and convincing enough to know that the world of The Witcher is grounded in its medieval, mature fantasy setting. From the model details, they all look fairly decent. Humanoid characters come in all shapes and sizes, with dwarves being short but having mighty beards, human townsfolk looking rather milquetoast, or drunk when you're near the inn, elves looking a bit bald, if I'm being honest, and the near majority of the ladies proudly showing their lovely bosoms. The general NPCs tend to have overlapping models, while most name characters have their own unique and better looking model. Both the clothing and facial textures can also look a bit blocky for some, with the exception, again, being the main cast of characters. Geralt looks fairly detailed with his more masculine design, and his clothes look cleanly textured. And if you see Zoltan, prepare to have his character stare into your soul. I wouldn't say the facial models are completely dated, because there are some with enough detail to make the character. But it is the lack of facial animations above the mouth that make it feel dated. There's no eyebrow or cheek expressions, and characters tend to look very dead-looking whenever you're in conversation with them.
In the night, a ghastly cold blows from the water, making my flesh crawl. Help me. I'll spare no expense.
There's also some weird lines that make the models look disjointed. You can see it in the neck regions of the characters, and particularly the beard line for some of the hermit-looking ones. I do find it impressive how The Witcher makes the city look alive. The NPCs that populate Vizima make it feel like a real city, and the game even makes it look more convincing during certain times of the day, like how the crowd will try and seek shelter from the rain, or how empty it feels at night. The monster models definitely feel like one of the better standouts, as there's a number of different body types that range from lanky-looking drowners, the vampire bruxas, who look a little too smooth and nice to be freakish monsters, the plant-like echinops, who actually look very cool because they have dead bodies on them, to the large praying mantis-looking frighteners. Watch out, husbands! They all have very bestial and monstrous-looking designs, so the age of the game doesn't make them look too dated for me. Also, I love how your medallion shakes whenever it's near monsters, and it looks like it's angry all the time. The environment isn't half bad either. The detail does look very jagged, and the age very much shows. But when you're not looking too hard, or you're in some larger locations, you can feel that it is a Witcher setting. The lush greenery, the poor and rich sections of Vizima, the open field of the lakeside, they all still present the fantasy setting of The Witcher very appropriately. Even though we see an older graphical version of Kaer Morhen, it still feels like the old decrepit home of the School of the Wolves. It does feel like the environmental aesthetic could be taken from a typical medieval fantasy setting, but it's the characters and even the monsters that help make it become the world of The Witcher. On the sound front, the effects are very good in emphasizing the different parts of The Witcher's scenes, from sword fighting, fending off monsters, walking around the city, visiting the outskirts of a remote village, or just being inside of a tavern and hearing the crowd of patrons. The sound effects make everything feel as fantasy as can be. The musical accompaniment is also well done. The Witcher has a very fantasy and folktale-like mood that the orchestra tries to emphasize. there is one particular combat music that I do find rather interesting. It's a specific track that includes a heavy metal riff whenever you fight certain bosses. It's not bad, and it does have a bit of an uplifting beat to it to hide in the action, but it feels like I've stepped out of my fantasy shoes and put on my Doomguy pants for a split second. Out of everything though, the voice acting is still the best. While I mentioned that the models don't have the best facial animations to make the characters emote, the voice cast offsets this to give each character their range of emotion, tone, pitch, and mannerisms.
Tala the Fence does nothing for free.
Taller the Fence is a scoundrel who'd prefer the Temple District not know he consorts with the cream of Vizima society.
Have it your way? Let me tell you, friend, a serious slashfest is in the works. One without pardon. The defeated will be picked apart by crows.
Nothing unusual.
Have you seen a unit of elves in the area?
No units.
Watch what you say. You're hardly untouchable. If I discover you working with the Scoia'tael...
Threatening me?
No. Merely helping you to avoid a serious error whose consequences might prove too dire for you to handle.
I'm a witcher. I could help.
Another witcher came recently. Berengar. He promised to slay the beast, but fled when it howled.
I'm not Berengar.
If you want my trust, bear the eternal fire's light to the people and dispel the darkness.
Though a bit on the older side, the first Witcher game still has a very fun and convincing presentation that will still make you feel like you're in the world of The Witcher. Despite being the first major title from CD Projekt Red, and despite the series evolving to become even better and better throughout the years, the first Witcher game still has a lot of depth in many of its elements that make it feel worthwhile to play today. While I wouldn't recommend it on many of its individual elements alone, it's how it all ties together in letting you step into the shoes of Geralt of Rivia. The adventuring that he has to undertake, the interesting combat styles of battling both man and monster, the political and ethical dramas of monarchs and kings, all make the journey of Geralt a fantastical one to go through. What really sold me on this title was the world. It's the nature of how everyone treats Geralt as a witcher, the nature of monsters plaguing a town, the nature of men and their agendas, is what really separates The Witcher from any other fantasy series, and the first is still a standout in showcasing these aspects. Do I feel like this is an important game to try? I think so. Though it's pretty clear that the Witcher series has evolved and iterated on many of the systems that the first game has created, it's still fun to see how it all started, and there's a bit of uniqueness about it that I think makes it stand out. I also really love seeing CD Projekt's first foray, and how it learned from it to make the other games in the series. Plus, I think one of the perks of playing this game is that you get to see some of your choices actually factor into the stories of the second game as well as the third. But if you enjoy the world of The Witcher, whether it be through the novels, the later games, or even the TV show, and you're okay with sitting through some slight bit of datedness, the first Witcher game holds up extremely well. But that's going to do it for today, guys. Thanks for sticking around. There will be more games to play and more videos coming soon, so please stay tuned if you'd like to see more. But for now, I'll see you all next time.